Good afternoon, everyone. I, Miss Nikita Gaikwad, Assistant Professor, Modern College of Pharmacy, Department of Pharmaceutics, welcome you all in AICTE-sponsored 5 days faculty development program on stress management. Before we start, there are some few announcements for our participants. Today's attendance link will be available in chat box in the middle of session, and you can drop your queries in the chat box that will be resolved after the session. So moving on to our next session, the topic understanding stress and tackling it by Dr. Sairaj Patki sir, Assistant Professor in Psychology at the Department of Social Science, School of Liberal Education, Flame University. He teaches the courses like abnormal psychology, experimental psychology, cognitive psychology, and psychology in action. He has over 9 years of teaching experience, including 4 years at the postgraduate level. He has been a full-time faculty at Symbiosis College of Arts, Commerce, and Modern College of Arts, Science, and Commerce. Also the visiting faculty at Savitribai Phule, Pune University, SNDT Women's University, and Ferguson College. He is also an academic counselor, approved guide, and examiner for Indira Gandhi National Open University for BA and MA Psychology program. He has completed his PhD in psychology. His PhD dissertation explored the employee-related and organization-related antecedents of organizational citizenship behavior. His broad research interests lie in the area of organizational behavior. His broad research interests lie in the area of adolescent well-being, emotional intelligence, and artificial intelligence. He has worked as a joint director and co-investigator for an ICSSR-sponsored research project which entitled Emotional Intelligence Among Adolescents, Tool Development and Enhancement Through Training and Study of Correlates. He has guided over 20 postgraduate research dissertation, has 12 journal publication and 3 books chapter to his credit. He has delivered a various invited talks, session, and workshop. Like he has delivered a talk on Quest of Happiness at Symbiosis College of Arts, Commerce, Pune through Symbiosis Center for Skill Development. Secondly, he also delivered the topic Human Resource Management at Department of Psychology, Ferguson College, Pune. He has also delivered the lecture topic Stress Management at Sri Swaraj Education Society, Swaraj College of Commerce and Computer Studies. Topic Depression at D.Y. Patil College under the Vidyarthi Arogya Prabodhan project of Savitribai Phule Pune University Health Center. He is also given the lecture on topics towards a happier life at CID office Pashan, Pune. Then topic towards a successful life for standard 9th and 10th students at Pawar Public School, Aminora Town, Pune. Also communication skill at Modern College of Arts, Commerce and Science, Pune and Symbiosis College of Arts, Commerce, Pune. He has delivered a session on topic from thinking to better thinking and communication skills for clerical employees of Pune People's Cooperative Bank at the Pune Jilla Nagri Sahakari Bank Association Training Center. Then topic positive work culture for assembly line employees of Bajaj Auto Akurdi plants by HR Department Pune in association with Tirupati Consultants. He has delivered webinar on emotional intelligence for employees of Reliance Industry Limited. He invited as a guest speaker for state level workshop on the topic mindfulness under the quality improvement program of SPPU at Modern Institute of Business Management. And he has also conducted the workshop on basics of emotional intelligence for staff and faculty at a Flame University. He has completed many certificate and training programs like Google Machine Learning and Dialogue Flow course, Protecting Human Research Participants online certification course, international workshop on importance of emotional intelligence for educator, which is organized by Modern College Pune in collaboration with 6 Second USA. Trainer certification course in emotional intelligence, Equip Kids India, Thane. Basic skills in counseling, 5-day residential course, Christian Counseling Center, Vellore. Also, he was a member of Board of Studies at St. Mira's College for Girls, Pune, and Modern College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Shivajinagar, for the academic year 1920. Also was a member of interview panel as psychologist for FTII diploma course from 2017 to 19. He is a psychometric test evaluator for newly developed diagnostic tool of reading ability by Dr. Asavari Barve. He is also the reviewer for the Mulyavardhan baseline summary report and data analysis. He also provided a statistical consultancy to several masters and PhD students. I would like to congratulate sirs for their achievements. Once again, welcome sir, and I request Dr. Sairaj Patki sir to begin with his talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Nikita ji. She's been very kind and patient to go through the entire detail. I feel a little embarrassed after spending so much time on that though.
No, sir. Thank you, sir.
I hope everybody has had lunch and is in a mood for the third session, because I know it's late in the afternoon, and especially for us Punekars, it's a little time for a nap. But I hope we'll have an engaging session. So first of all, thank you to Nikita ji and thank you to Dr. Bhushan for inviting me. It's actually a wonderful initiative, and I must congratulate the entire team for that. Because throughout the pandemic, I had delivered lectures across corporates, be it Reliance or be it the other industries. And it's very little that has been spoken about academicians. So I think it's a good platform for all of us to relate to what we as academicians are going through, the kind of shift we have had to do through online teaching, online learning, online evaluations, and the entire process, and how that has been a stressful, that entire period has been stressful for us in terms of research, in terms of teaching and all of it. So I must congratulate them once again for hosting this event. And I know it's a very comprehensive event with a variety of speakers across different walks of life, across different expertise. And that's something I think makes it much more wholesome, much more holistic, because we are looking at the topic of stress and stress management, which is spoken so commonly these days, but from a variety of perspectives, a variety of angles. So I think I must congratulate them for that. And with your permission, I would like to start with my presentation. Throughout the presentation, there would be some activities that I would like the participants to be engaged in. If this was in an offline scenario, obviously these activities would have been much more fun to conduct and supervise while we're doing it together. But nonetheless, let's try to make this as engaging, as interactive as possible. Towards the end, we will definitely have at least 20 minutes for question and answers coming in at the end through the chat. But in between, if you have any questions, if you have any queries for things that I've been discussing on the slides, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we should definitely try to go through all of those doubts towards the end. Yeah. So thank you once again for all of you who are here, in spite of it being an afternoon on the second day, and welcome once again to this session. So what I would be speaking about, you have been hearing about stress, you have been discussing stress since yesterday, and there would be different perspectives, the spiritual perspective of looking at it, the alternative medicine's perspective of looking at it. Just prior to this session, you've looked at how exercising can benefit in dealing with stress. So there would be multiple perspectives and multiple ways in which people will tell you how stress can be dealt with. As a psychologist, I would have my own way of looking at it. As a pediatrician, somebody would give you their own words of advice. As a spiritual mentor, then people would give their advice. The idea is that why is it that we are looking at it from so many perspectives is because stress, though is a very common term, we use it very commonly, we all have experienced it. The same solution is not going to fit all of us. The same solution is not going to fit every situation. So it's necessary to look at stress, to understand stress in a much more holistic perspective so that we are able to tackle it. Right? So in this session, we are trying to look at stress from an academic perspective, from a theoretical perspective, while touching upon different perspectives, be it biological, psychological, social, and so on. And while we're doing that, we are also trying to understand how do we tackle with stress, right? So how is that we can tackle something that we don't understand? So that's why the first step of trying to understand what stress is, how different theorists have looked at stress, and then trying to tackle these. So I know when I say there are going to be theoretical perspectives, some people might feel that it's going to get boring, it's going to get too technical, but please stay along with me. I'm sure that we won't be going too much into the theories, too much into the details of it. But being academicians, we always have this critical perspective towards things, and we always want to know the scientific background for things. So even stress is something that we need to discuss from a much more academic perspective and then be able to deal with it, tackle it, and be much better equipped to face the different challenges that we have in life. Yes. So a quick look at what other aspects that we'll be looking at in this session. So we'll be briefly having a quick recap of what stress is from what you've understood about stress across the sessions that you've already had. We'll look at the different types of stress again briefly. And then mainly our entire discussion today for the next 1.5 to 2 hours is going to be about having a multiple perspective of stress. So we are going to look at the biological components of stress, the psychological components of stress, as well as the social components of stress. And we'll see how stress is not a phenomenon that can be categorized as purely biological or purely psychological or purely social. It is going to have an interplay and interconnection of all of these aspects, and all of them together are going to influence it. So if you have to tackle stress, it again means that we'll have to tackle it at different fronts. We can't just have it tackled at the biological level. We can't just tackle it at the psychological level. We can't just tackle it at the social level. It will have to be multiple ways in which we tackle it, depending upon the situation, depending upon the requirements, depending upon the type of stress that we are dealing with. As I said, we'll be then looking at the different theoretical perspectives of stress and how stress has been conceptualized in psychology across history, and what are the newer perspectives and how do we look at evidence for that. And at each stage, as I said, we'll be having some activities that we'll be doing, which one makes sure that we are awake and engaged in the session, and two also gives us an opportunity to not just know the theory, but try to apply what the wisdom from the theory is coming into. Yes, so one quick request for all the participants. If you don't have a notepad or a pencil or a paper or something to note down things, to write down things, you can just take 5 minutes quickly and get something to write, get something to write upon, either a sheet of paper or a notepad or books, because we'll be doing certain activities for which we'll be needing those. So if somebody doesn't have that, we can just quickly go and fetch a sheet of paper, a notebook, something to write upon, and be ready for the activities. And after that is when we'll have the open forum for the question and answers coming. Yes, so we'll just take a minute for people to get something to write upon. And the mission towards the end of the session would be to help the zebra get its stripes back in place. Okay, so I hope everybody is ready with something to write things on. So one of my favorite comics, Delbert, talks about different aspects at the workplace, different issues that take place at the workplace. And when we think about academicians and when we are getting back to work, campuses are opening up, students are coming back to campus. There was a kind of a confusion as to whether exams will take place. If yes, what will be the nature? Would we have online classes? Would we have hybrid classes? So this entire period has been quite a lot of challenges for all of us. And the work is, we hopefully imagine that the work would be the least of the stressful part of our lives. But sometimes what happens is that the work part at the job becomes the most stressful part. So I like the campus, but I'm stressed about grading. I love the students, but I'm stressed about probably my research work. So I'm sure we all will empathize with each other on these terms that we have to dabble with too many responsibilities at the same point of time. There will be admin work that becomes compulsory. There'll be a lot of research work that we want to focus on. There'll be a lot of grading that we have to also focus on, a lot of teaching, a lot of mentoring that will go on. And throughout this entire process, we hope that things are much more uniform, things are less stressful as far as possible. But there could be some unfortunate events wherein people have stressed not just about the work, but about colleagues, about things happening at home, about things happening in their personal lives. So there could be multiple ways in which there could be stress that's affecting us. Right? So we have moved on. Even before this session, we have moved on to, first of all, acknowledging and accepting that, yes, we are undergoing a stressful time. As long as that acceptance wasn't there, it was difficult to have a session, it was difficult to have some kind of intervention taking place. So at least now we are all on the same page in terms of accepting that, yes, it has been a stressful 2 years. It has been a very stressful time for us. We have been undergoing personal challenges, professional challenges, and now we're trying to understand why these challenges have been there and how we could better deal, how we could better cope with these, right? So it's a good starting point for all of us that we have first accepted that there is stress. If we are in the phase of denial that we are not experiencing stress or we never have a stressful day in our life, then it becomes difficult to understand it and then do something about it. So at least we now all accept that, yes, there are certain days that can be stressful for us. For some people, there may be more days that are stressful than not, and that's what we're trying to understand. Yes. So in terms of the intensity of stress, when we're talking about how intense is stress, when we're looking at it more from an arousal perspective or physiological perspective, we say that, when we are stressed, there is an increase in heart rate. We say that there is an increase in, the entire body activity that's taking place. There are many hormones that are being flowing in the body. So when we're looking at stress from this perspective, if you look at it in terms of a continuum moving from being entirely calm, entirely composed, then moving on to some levels of energy, and then moving on to levels of energy that can become really, really difficult to manage. Right? So we can look at this graph and try and understand what exactly happens at different levels of stress. How is it that our performance keeps on changing? Right? To take an example, if you have a student in class who is least bothered about probably studies, is not worried about the exams at all, there is no pressure from home about performing in the exam, there are chances that the student will not take enough effort, will not put in enough motivation into the work, because there is extreme level of calmness there. Calmness not from just the point of view of being relaxed, but calmness from the point of view of not being engaged enough, not being aroused, not being excited about the particular task at hand. So from that perspective, if you're looking at really low levels of excitement, really low levels of arousal, the person wouldn't have that energy, the person wouldn't have that kind of drive to perform into some act that has been given to them. Right? We slightly keep on increasing these excitement levels, these arousement levels, and we then reach a very optimum point, which we call as eustress. That's the positive aspect of stress. So when we're looking at eustress, That's that point in our arousal levels which are optimum. So they are not at a very low level where there is no motivation, you don't feel that drive to work, but it's also not so high that your performance gets affected negatively. So it's that optimum level of stress, which we term as eustress or positive stress, which helps you perform the best because there is a drive, there is that energy, there is a physiological energy that's there, that's that motivation that's there, and you are working at that energy level and you're able to finish that work. To take an example, let's say you're arranging a birthday party for a relative, or if there is some festival that's happening right now and you're preparing for that festival, or if there's a housewarming party and you're preparing for that, there would be some amounts of stress. Right? There would be some amount of preparation anxiety. There would be some amount of planning that will go into it. And all of that does leave us with a little stress. We all feel a little stressed about it. We all feel a little worked up about it. But because there are happy emotions associated with it, be it a festival, be it friends, relatives, because there are a lot of positive emotions that are associated with this form of excitement, it becomes a positive level of stress wherein you're performing really at a very high level. You get the work done, you also feel tired, but you also feel happy about what has been achieved. So there's a sense of satisfaction, there's a sense of achievement that is there. Yeah, so that's the type of stress which we term as eustress or positive stress, which helps you perform better, in fact, and that's necessary to have some amount of arousal there. But what happens if we keep on extending this kind of energy, we keep on extending this kind of arousal, that kind of anxiety to a level beyond eustress? That's when you see even in the graph that the performance starts dipping once again, and then it goes into something which we call as distress, right? So that's something which is unpleasant. It is something which is causing physiological reactions. Psychologically, it's leading to a lot of discomfort, and the person themselves or people around them will notice that there is something wrong with this person, that they're not happy, they're not satisfied, they look very tired. Fatigue is something that becomes very common. So from eustress, you are moving now to distress, right? So we're looking at what is the most optimum level of energy that one would require. If it goes beyond that optimum level, that's going to become unpleasant for us again. If there is no energy at all, again, performance will be poor. If there is an optimum level of performance of energy, then that's where performance will be the best. Right now, when we're talking about this curve, is it possible to always remain at this level of eustress? Then that's again an unrealistic expectation. Right? There will be moments wherein we'll have to calm down. There will be moments where we'll have to take a break. We'll have to slow down our functioning, and there will be times wherein we will feel distress. Right? But it's the balance of these three that makes us a successful, makes us a fully functioning adaptive person. If distress becomes majority of the proportion and there's no calm at all and there's very little stress, that's when things are going to become problematic. Okay, so this balance is what we're trying to look at, and how do we maintain this balance in terms of the intensity of stress. Now, what about the duration of stress? We spoke about the intensity of stress. What about duration of stress? We speak about stress like a very umbrella topic, but if you actually see, there are many types in this. There are many sub levels of the stress, right? So there could be some events that, or some stressors for us that are temporary, that suddenly come up and then also leave in, after some duration, there is no stressor that's left. Okay, so you can look at the list for some of these acute stress examples. So let's say that there's a presentation, there's a conference that's coming up and you're preparing the PPT for it. Or it could be, the annual appraisal that you have and your research work needs to be compiled. Or maybe that, your organization, your school, your college is going for NAC and you're preparing for that. So all of these things are temporary issues, temporary events that are taking place in your life. Could be in your personal life in terms of some arguments with friends, some disagreements with at home, or it could be just traffic. So these are going to be temporary issues which suddenly come up, but they also leave after a certain time. So these are temporary issues that are causing stress, which we call as acute stress. Again, is it dangerous? Yes, if there is an extreme level of acute stress, that too is going to be physically very harmful. But in most cases, when you have this acute stress that's building up, the solution to it also comes in a while, or those things are such that they are temporary. So once the NAC visit is done, things kind of slow down again. Once your paper is published, once your conference is done, again, things slow down a little. So after these events, because they are temporary, the stress is going to kind of reduce on its own. The more dangerous one, however, is the chronic stress part. This is like slow poisoning. If you have to have a metaphor for it, it's almost like slow poisoning, because most people will notice acute stress. You'll see that the person looks tired. You'll see that the person is not sleeping well, is not eating well. So acute stress can be immediately seen. The effects are visible, very clear. With chronic stress, unfortunately, this is like, a very slow process, gradually happening over months, over years also for some people. And that could be because of any form of relationships that they are into that are troublesome. It could be a toxic family environment that they are into. It could be the workplace which is not very adaptive. It's a workplace which is very difficult to survive in, very competitive corporate kind of a world or an environment. It could be that their sleep habits are not good, their eating habits are not good. That's why you'll see that whenever we talk about stress, we also talk about meditation, talk about nutrition, because it's an overall aspect that needs to be considered, right? Or it could be something like maybe COVID or COVID-like symptoms, which has now become a new kind of an issue. There are many people who have viral conditions. They test, the test comes negative for COVID, but the symptoms are very similar to COVID, right? So it could be an ongoing health condition, maybe a slightly longer health condition like diabetes or thyroid, which is again causing a lot of problems. So it could either be acute stress, which is going to be temporary, or it could be chronic stress. Okay? Because both of these are so different, because both of these are having an effect on different aspects of our life. You can't have one same formula, one same solution for both of them. For dealing with acute stress, there will be some different techniques that will be required. For dealing with chronic stress, there will be certain different techniques that will be required, right? So that is where that understanding of stress, its typology, and then what is the best fit in terms of the intervention. That is what is going to help us to deal with the stressful situation. Okay, so we have looked at eustress and distress as the major types of stress, one being positive, the latter being negative in terms of adaptability. And in terms of duration, we have seen that there could be temporary troubling issues or events that we call as acute stress. And there could be something that is much more long-term, much more gradual in terms of its impact, but again, equally dangerous. And that is something that we call as chronic stress. Okay, and then we'll discuss how the techniques could be different for each of these. When there's personal issues involved, when there are work issues involved, there are some things that we can change, there are some things that we can't change, right? So how do you deal with things you can change? How do you deal with things that you can't change? And that is what will help us to tackle the stress. Okay, so as I said, we will be looking at a three-pronged perspective of stress. We have, since day one, I'm sure you've discussed that there are biological aspects to stress. It's not just an emotion, it's not just a thought. There are definite biological changes that take place in the body. There are numerous animal studies that have shown this. There are numerous human studies that have shown that there are actual biochemical changes taking place in the body when a person is undergoing stress, right? But along with these biological changes, there are certain psychological changes as well. And along with these two, there will be some social changes that take place in a person's life, right? So when we're looking at biological changes, what exactly could these be? It could be in terms of experiencing fatigue. It could be in terms of, the sleep being disturbed. It could be in terms of digestion being hampered to a great extent. So there'll be a lot of these biological signs and symptoms that you'll see that take place immediately whenever there's stress. right? To give you an easy example, whenever there is some difficult task, maybe an interview, maybe an important seminar or anything of that sort, some of us may not feel like eating enough food, or you may get a little nauseatic. That is exactly a sign of there being some amount of stress in that situation, right? So there will be these biological changes that will take place in the body. Along with that, because we know that the mind and the body are very closely connected now, we don't live in that era of academics wherein we consider these to be two separate dichotomies. There is an entire area of psychology dedicated to how mind and body are related in terms of illness, which is called as health psychology, right? So health psychology exactly looks at this mind body connection and how that impacts illness, how illness impacts health, and so on. So how there is this interaction between the mind and the body, right? So when we look at the psychological aspects, what do we mean by psychological aspects? As psychologists, we usually divide it into three components. What is somebody's, in terms of their emotions, what are their emotions at this point of time? What thoughts are going on in the person's mind? And then because of this combination, how is it that the person is behaving in their day-to-day life, right? And is there any drastic change that you see in their behavior? So for example, if one of your colleagues is remaining absent very frequently these days, you try to call them up, they don't respond, or they respond very briefly, they aren't talking much. If you see their Instagram handle, if you see their social media, they're not very active on that. So what you're seeing is the behavior of this person, right? We cannot see what is going on in the person's mind. We cannot see what they're feeling in their mind, right? But we can only infer from the behavior what exactly could be possibly happening. What is the thought process they're having? How is it they're feeling at this point of time? But that is where we need to understand, even for ourselves, not just for our colleagues and for people we love, but in general, even for ourselves. When I say that I really got angry and I drove rashly or I honked very loudly that day because there was a lot of traffic and I was getting irritated and I kept honking on the street, right? That's the behavior. But what happened before that? Is this anger just anger? Is it coming from frustration? Is it coming from some guilt? Is it coming from sorrow? So there could be many layers to our emotions, and that is what we need to understand, right? The day we are able to understand these, as an emotional intelligence trainer, this is something that we try to focus on constantly. We try to understand these different layers of emotions. Okay. In olden days, they used to say you shouldn't be emotional. An emotional person is very weak. You should be very rational. You should be very practical in your life. If you're emotional, then you won't succeed, right? This was a very wrong notion that was there, because we always thought that thoughts and emotions are something that are completely different. Today, we know through neurobiological studies that your thoughts and emotions are interlinked with each other. So if you truly want to be successful, if you truly want to be satisfied, then you have to see what is the connection between emotions and your thoughts. The thoughts and your emotions are going to affect each other. Okay, to give you an example, let's say that this workshop is there, somebody is attending this workshop, but at the end of the week they have some deadline to be met. Maybe it's a report they have to submit, maybe it's a paper they have to present, maybe it's some official documents that they have to create, it's some Excel sheet that they have to prepare, some data they have to analyze. There could be a lot of deadlines that are waiting for this person, right? Physically they are attending this session, physically they feel that, okay, I'm trying to understand stress, but constantly at the back of their mind, what they're going to have is these thoughts related to those deadlines. So though behavior wise they are attending the session, their thoughts are not in line with what is happening in the session. Their thoughts are drifting somewhere, and because their thoughts are not in coordination with the behavior, the emotions are also not going to be pleasant in that sense. They might not enjoy the sessions to the fullest, because half of their thoughts are concentrated on the deadlines that are pending, right? So there is going to be a clear-cut connection between what you feel, what you think, and therefore how you behave. And these emotions are nothing but data for us. We should in fact be paying more attention to them. We should in fact be learning from this data, making use of this data. So when I say that I got angry, I screamed at a colleague or I screamed at an office boy, or I felt like screaming at the office boy, then it means that there is something that my body is trying to tell me. There is something that my mind is trying to tell me. Why is it that I lost my control? Right? It's not enough to say that, okay, I feel sorry for doing that, but you need to understand why that happened. Is there something happening in my life? Is there something happening in my thought process? What is it that I've been feeling in the past week? All of that is going to be, very integral in determining how I behave at my workplace, how I behave at home, how I behave on the road. Right? So when you understand this link between emotions, cognitions, or thoughts, and between your behavior, that is when you'll be able to understand psychologically what is stress doing to you. Biologically, you have a headache, you probably take some tablets. You have, some back pain, you will take rest, you'll sleep, and then you'll feel better. The back will feel better. But what about what's happening in the mind? Even when you're taking painkillers, even when you're using some form of muscle relaxants, even if you're taking rest over the weekend, if your mind is not at a happy, healthy position, then those thoughts are constantly going to bother you. Sleep is not going to be sufficient. Even if you sleep for 8 hours, when you wake up in the morning, you still feel very, fatigued. You still feel lack of energy and all of it, right? So that is the connection that we need to understand between emotions, thoughts, and behavior. And that's when we'll be able to master this skill of dealing with stress at a psychological level as well. Right? So biologically, there are ways in which we can deal with it. Psychologically, there will be certain ways in which we can deal with it. Now, the way we are dealing with our lives, the way we are living our lives, especially in the metro cities, especially in developing countries, and even in developed countries for that matter, there is so much competition, there is so much work that is constantly going on. There are so many deadlines, so many timelines that we have to follow, that stress does not remain a personal issue anymore. It has become a social issue, right? So there are two extremes of people. There are some people who constantly complain about stress. They always say that, I'm stressed right now, I won't be able to do this. There will be another extreme of people who are experiencing stress, but they don't want to show that. They don't want to talk about it. They'll try to suppress that and continue working, right? Now, why is it that something that is biological, why is it that something that is very psychological, it's part of us, why is it that in a social setup when we are discussing stress, we are tempted to either boast about it, either victimize it, or we are tempted to run away from it, to hide it, right? It is something, it is a topic that needs to be discussed. It is something that we need to share with our friends. It is something that we need to help each other deal with. And therefore, the social component of stress is something that we need to be very, very careful about. Starts off with ourselves and then extending it to our loved ones, to people around us. How is it that we can help each other deal with stress at a social level? Can we stop our biases? Can we reduce the biases? Can we stop labeling people by saying that, this person cannot deal with stress? Or can we stop by saying people, by telling people that this is how, you're using stress as an excuse to not doing work? Or the other way around, can we stop praising people who are stressed but still continue working? Right? So at a social level, also we'll have to think about how stress is affecting us. Is social media in some way contributing to it? Is news in some way contributing to it? Is there a lot of negativity that's there in media? Can we pull ourselves out of this vicious cycle so that at a social level also we are dealing with stress? Okay, so if you see right now what is happening socially, there's a lot of polarization of views. Rather than moving towards a more democratic, towards a more, understanding, equitable universe, we are moving towards polarity. We're talking about faults in others more as compared to what was done earlier. Okay, so socially, how is it affecting us as individuals of part of the society? So that's what we need to consider. So biological, psychological, and social. That's how we try to understand stress and therefore try to deal with it at our own level. Okay, so these are some of the symptoms, signs and symptoms that you will see among yourselves. It's something that if you notice that, it should be taken as data. It should be taken as a warning sign that, okay, I think my body is telling me that I am fatigued. I think my body is telling me that I need sleep. I think my body is telling me that I need a break. right? If you at least have this kind of understanding, if you at least have this kind of introspection, it will then help you take the next step of doing something about it. But if you keep neglecting it, it's only going to add up and it's only going to spoil your health much more in a gradual manner, which you will probably not understand. People around you might notice that you have suddenly changed. There's something that's happened with you, right? So that's something that we need to consider. Okay. Now, taking an example of what probably some of us do experience, when we are at work, we are constantly thinking about, oh, I need rest. I need to take a break now. There's too much work. When we are trying to fall asleep, there are all of these thoughts. Oh, I didn't finish, writing this letter of recommendation today. I have 2 letters to write tomorrow. I have 5 mails to be sent tomorrow. I have 7 mails to be responded to. There is a lot of admin work that's left. I still have to work on my research proposal. So if you have these thoughts when you're going to bed, one, it will be difficult to fall asleep. Two, if at all you fall asleep, it's not going to be good quality of sleep, right? So we talk about sleep in terms of not just the duration, but the quality of sleep. It will not be fulfilling sleep, which means the next day you go to office, the next day you go to work, and you'll still feel tired. You'll go back home tired. That tiredness will again lead to more anxiety about work that was not completed, and it becomes a vicious cycle. Right? So what is happening biologically, psychologically, and socially, if we don't break this chain of events, this is something that will keep continuing till either we notice it ourselves or people notice it and bring it to others. Right? So we need to break this chain of the stress before it becomes too much to handle. Okay. So as I said, we'll be looking at some theoretical perspectives one by one, trying to understand how stress has been identified, how stress has been understood over the years. Why we are doing this is not just to understand the academic perspective behind it, but that will help us to understand what exactly can be done to tackle stress as well. Because if stress is a biological aspect, how do you deal with it? If stress is a psychological aspect, how do you deal with it? So we'll take one theory at a time. We'll try to understand what is the theory is trying to explain about stress, and then try to have some activities that will help us deal with it from that perspective. Okay, so these 4 perspectives are what we are going to focus on today, and one by one we'll see what they are. Okay, I know I've been talking a lot until now, and we'll be having the first theory followed by an activity so that we all are on the same page. It doesn't sound that there's a lot of theory that's going on, and we're actually trying to understand biologically, psychologically, socially what's happening in terms of stress. Yeah. So the first aspect of stress that Cannon put forth looked at stress as a very biological, as a pure biological event. So there is a stressor in the environment. It could be illness. It could be an animal that's trying to attack you. It could be a natural calamity. It could be a pandemic like the one we are facing right now. So these events that are taking place around us, or these stressors that are there, they are having a direct biological impact on our body. Okay, we'll see what this impact is and how this cycle functions. But the idea is that there is a biological reaction, and that reaction is our stress reaction. We are reacting to what is happening in the environment, or we're reacting to what's happening in our body in a stressful manner. Right? So stress is not actually negative in that sense. It's actually body's way of trying to cope with what is happening. It's the body's own way of defending what is happening, or preparing us to fight or run away from that situation that's there. Okay, so when our ancestors had different stressful situations, in the chat, could somebody just think about what could be the challenges for the Stone Age man, for a Stone Age person during the Stone Age era? What could have been different challenges? What could have been different stressful events? They didn't have to publish papers. They didn't have to attend meetings. They didn't have Zoom webinars. What were the stressful situations for our ancestors? By ancestors, we mean really in ancient times, when we moved from apes to becoming bipedal and then becoming humans in the true sense. Could we have a few answers in the chat of what could possibly be the issues that our Stone Age ancestors would have witnessed? Hunger. Okay. Professor Sandhya has mentioned hunger as one of the issue. Yes, so if you're talking about hunger in those days, obviously there was no Zomato, there was no Swiggy. You had to hunt, you had to search for your own food, you had to grow your own food, and that was the only way in which food was available, right? That was the only way in which hunger could be dealt with. So imagine that there is a group of these Stone Age people that are living in a cave, and the only way in which they can deal with this biological need of hunger is by hunting. So you would have to physically go outside the cave, go into the jungle, look for an animal, prepare your own weapons, hunt that animal, try to hunt that animal. In that process, have a lot of dangerous events that could be there. There could be venomous snakes, there could be animals that could attack them. So all of these were the stressful events that were there. Right? They were real stressful events in that sense. Natural calamities, yes, because we didn't have structures that could have protected them. They would have to deal with natural calamities in their own way. So entire civilizations were wiped out during the floods because technology hadn't advanced enough to give us warnings. Now, even after having warnings for weather, we still are facing floods and we still have those issues. So imagine in a time when there were no warnings at all, what all natural calamities could have been and what effect they could have had on people. Okay, so these were the stressful situations. You're talking about hunger, you're talking about wild animals, we're talking about wars that are physically being conducted almost every day. We're talking about natural calamities and natural elements that these Stone Age people have to deal with. Now, to deal with these, how is the body going to react and how is the body going to fight these challenges? If you're hungry and you don't have that energy, you don't have that drive, will you have the energy to actually go out and hunt? If there is a wild animal that's about to attack you, if you don't have the energy, will you be able to run from that scenario? It won't be possible, right? So the way our brain and body developed from that point of time is to prepare us for this fight or flight response. For some of the animals, it's also the freeze response, wherein they just freeze and they don't move because that's how they protect themselves from the predator. But as far as humans are concerned, mostly it's the fight or flight response that we talk about. You all must have heard this term frequently in some of the theories as well, right? So fight and flight response, how does this response take place? We'll take a look at what is happening biologically in the brain and how does that translate to what's happening in the body. There is no philosophical discussion happening here. There is no theoretical discussion happening here. It's a pure biological fact as to what the step-by-step process of things are that happen in your own body, right? So if a person is in a stressful situation, let's say that the tire is punctured and there is nobody to help, or your phone is lost or your laptop is lost, when you're facing with these situations, what is happening is that the hypothalamus, there's a part in the brain called the hypothalamus which gets all of this information and then transmits it to other regions of the brain. The hypothalamus is also linked to what we call as the emotional brain or the limbic system of the brain. So this hypothalamus gets this data that there is something problematic in the environment that's happening with you right now. It will then alert the pituitary gland, which we know as the master gland, which controls all the other glands or has its influence on all the other glands. So the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland that there is a stressful situation, there is something there's a problem that's happening, and you need to be ready to deal with this problem. Okay, so the pituitary gland then goes on to excite the adrenal gland, which are on top of the kidneys, and they become activated and they release what are called as corticoids or cortisols, which are nothing but your adrenal rush. Right? So when we say that I'm having an adrenal rush, I'm having that drive of energy, that is nothing but these hormones, these steroids being released in the bloodstream. So it started off in the brain, moved on to the body, and now the entire body, the bloodstream is slowly being pumped with adrenaline. It's slowly being pumped with this energy. So that energy is that hormones, they are going to reach the different parts of the body. That's when we say that your pupils are going to dilate, your skeletal muscles are going to get the energy, Your legs are going to start preparing for running. Your hands are going to get the strength to fight as you need to fight. So physically, what is happening is your body is getting ready. It's like a turbocharger in a car. You press the accelerator, the turbocharger gets activated. If you were able to run at 6 kilometers per hour on a usual day, because there is a wild animal or there's a dog that's chasing you, today you'll run slightly faster than that. You're getting that extra energy to do that because you're stressed at this point. Your brain has told your body that there is something dangerous. If you have to protect yourself, either you'll have to fight it or you'll have to run away from this situation. Okay, so the brain is preparing the body for this actual fight like scenario or running away from the situation. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is while we have evolved in many other ways in terms of addressing, in terms of what occupations we do, this response is still more or less primitive in that sense. So even now, if I have an exam, or even now if I'm meeting somebody new, or if there is a new job that I'm trying to do, or if there's any new situation that's there, or a stressful situation that is there, the brain unfortunately is following that same old process that happened when the Stone Age persons were dealing with stress. So while their issues were genuinely got to do with fighting or flying away or fleeing away from that scenario, even for us today, when we are going to enter the boss's cabin, or if we are having the appraisal meeting, or if we are having a seminar and we have to give a talk in front of people, what is happening is the brain is telling the body, get ready for action. But this action is about either fighting or running away. Now, you can't run away from your boss, you can't fight the exam, you can't do any of these things that a Stone Age person would have successfully done with the help of this brain and body system. Right? So unfortunately, what happens is we experience those physiological changes, which we cannot translate into behavior. We cannot run away from our office. We cannot fight with our boss. Then what exactly is happening with this biological energy that is created in the body? It then leads to different form of stress reactions. So formation of ulcers, issues with digestion, all of these start off because that energy that has been created is not getting translated into something that can help you from the stress. Our stressful situations are much different from the Stone Age person, but our reaction to it, unfortunately, is still primitive. But if we understand this, there is one little chance that we have to break this chain, because once the hormones start flowing into the bloodstream, there's no stopping it. It will continue till the brain reaches a point where there is too much of these hormones, and that's when the brain will stop producing them. But until that, it's like an auto mode, it's an autopilot mode on which the body is going, and you can't stop it after that. There is one point where you can stop it, and that is when you had seen that stimulus, when you had noticed that stimulus. If you can stop the hypothalamus from passing on that information to the pituitary gland in a wrong manner, that this is a negative, dangerous event, if at that point itself you can try and include some thought into it, control those emotions at that point of time, that's the only way in which the cycle will not start. Okay, so that is what we are going to understand as to how do we break this chain at the starting point itself. How do we intervene at the starting point itself so that the next reaction doesn't start off. Okay, so we are now going to do a quick muscle relaxation activity. I know there's a lot of sessions that we'll have or have had yesterday and today as well on meditation. And there'll be different types of meditation. There'll be some that will be more spiritual. There'll be some from the Zen Buddhism style. There'll be some from the Hinduistic perspective. There'll be different forms of meditation that we do. So what we are doing right now is more of muscle relaxation rather than meditation. You cannot call it meditation in that sense. It's more of relaxing your muscles and exercising them in a way that tells your brain that I am the boss. Okay, so what has happened over a period of time is that we let the brain decide certain things. We put it on autopilot and we let the brain decide what's to be done. But the brain, unfortunately, is going back to the fight and flight response, which is not helpful for us. So we want the brain to take a pause. We want the brain to understand that the fight and flight response is not what I want right now. Okay, but this will come only with practice, and it will come with practice of what we call as progressive muscular relaxation technique. So we'll try out one. You can obviously try doing this at home later on. But there will obviously be some rules and methods of what should be done, how it should be done. So it's preferable that you do it when there is a trained person telling you and you're supervised while doing that, like any other form of yoga or any other form of meditation. But what we're trying to do is a glimpse of what exactly is happening in the body and how the mind and body are connected. We feel that it's an autopilot mode. It need not be on autopilot. We can take the control in our hand and tell the brain that yes, we can stop this chain. Okay, so I want everyone to just be relaxed, keep everything away. Uh, just keep the pencil away, just keep your phone away, especially if you have that. Just try to focus on this moment, that experience that you are having. And what we are going to do is we are going to start with just one hand and experience how that feeling is. Right? So what you have to do is, for a count of 10, don't start it right, we'll start it after a while. Just listen to the instructions first. So for a count of 10, we are going to hold our right fist, our right hand fist, and we're going to clench it in a tight fist this way. Okay. But while you're doing this, just make sure that you're not clenching your jaws like this, or you're not clenching your forearm or your shoulder or any other part of the body. It's only the right fist that you have to focus on. And for a count of 10, slowly in your mind, just count 10, 1, 2, 3. In that pace, you're just counting 10, and all that while you're holding your fist very tightly. After a count of 10, we are going to release our palm slowly and focus our attention on how that relaxed feeling is. That change from clenching it, you'll see that all the blood gets concentrated, and suddenly when you release it, there's a very momentary feeling of that control, that suddenly that relaxed moment. Again, we're going to hold it for 10, a count of 10, and again release it. Okay, so is everybody ready? Can we start that? So just hold your right palm in front of you. Try to focus all your attention on the experiences you're getting from the palm, whatever sensations you're having. Try to focus on that. Make sure you're not tightening any other body part. It's just the palm that you're focusing on. And then start holding it tightly. If it helps, you can close your eyes. If it helps you to concentrate better, just close your eyes. Hold your palm, hold it in a fist, and clench that fist tightly and hold it for a count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now slowly release your palm and experience that sudden change, that flow in the bloodstream, and that sudden change, that relaxation, and how your muscles are feeling right now. Again, hold it loose for a count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, now again, we're going to hold it tightly for a count of 10. So again, clench your fist tightly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And slowly release it and try to focus all your attention on how that hand now feels, how it was feeling when it was clenched tightly, and how that relaxed feeling is now, and how that difference that is there in this feeling has now changed. Right? So this we have tried out only with the right fist now. When we're doing this entire exercise, we usually do it with the entire body moving from one part of the body to the other part. That's why it's called as progressive muscle relaxation. You move from one muscle to the next, then you go to the jaws, you go to the next hands, you go to the arms, legs, feet. Because what happens is each of us has a different way of reacting to stress. When somebody is stressed, some people have a slight stomach ache. It's a nauseatic feeling in the stomach. Some people have a headache. Some people have a feeling of being suffocated in the chest. There are some other people who have neck pain when they suddenly are stressed. Okay, so all of these signs you'll start seeing within yourself when you are stressed. On a day, on a week when you've worked really hard, it's been a very difficult week. Some people will suddenly start having lower back pain. Some people will start having neck pain. Yes, it is also because of the screen that you're looking at. If you're traveling or not, it could be because of that. But it is also because when we are stressed, our body is trying to tighten up in that old fashion of fight and flight. Okay, what we have to tell the brain is that, okay, I understand you're stressed right now, but we can neither fight this, we can neither fly, or we can neither go away or run away from the situation. So the way you are holding yourself tightly, the way you're causing that tension, the same way I am the person who's control of even relaxing. I am going to decide whether I want to clench it or whether I want to release it. Slowly you're forming that body mind connection to such an extent that it moves from autopilot to a manual pilot mode. You're trying to give that brain that practice, that exercise of then being able to connect and then being able to control itself. So you are deciding that I want to be relaxed at this point of time. So if I can cause that tension in my body, I can also count back and I can bring that relaxed moment to myself. So whenever you're stressed, try to notice what muscle is getting stressed at that point of time. Are your knees getting weak? Are your hands starting to tremble? Is there some form of neck pain that's happening with you? Is there a frown that you are having? Try to identify which muscle combinations are working, and then we are trying to reverse engineer, kind of untrain our brain to focus on these points and try to relax them. So at least physiologically, you're relaxing your body so that you can then focus on other things. Because if you have a headache, if you have a body pain, you won't be able to focus on your work, and you're now focusing on some other biological issues that are taking place. So if we relax our body, then is when we are going to move to actually tackling the problem that we're going to have at hand. Okay. Yes. So how do we do that for other body parts? As I said, we usually recommend that this is done in a supervised manner. Today, unfortunately, we won't be able to spend enough time to do all the body parts, but the same way you're going to do it for different body parts. So what we did for the fist, the same thing you can do for the forearm, wherein you're holding your forearm tightly. So this is also an exercise itself in understanding how a different control on our muscles is. So that then you're trying to do it with your shoulders. You can do it with your jaws, wherein you're holding your jaws tightly this way and holding it that way for a count of 10. Then you're doing it with a frown. So if you hold it this way, I know it looks funny, but you're trying to hold it this way and hold that frown for 10, for a count of 10. And that will mimic what happens when you're having a headache. And moment after that, you're trying to, again, for a count of 10, leave it relaxed. So you will see that you are creating your own headaches and you are now undoing your headaches in that sense, in a very simplistic manner, if you have to do it. Okay, so that way we can do it with the feet, we can do it with the calves. It depends on what body part gets tensed for you. For different people, there could be different combinations that will be needed. Again, as I said, please do this under supervision, because there are some restrictions of if you have a heart implant, then you're not supposed to do it. What time of the day, if you have had food, you're not supposed to do it. So there are some basic restrictions that you need to follow. So if you ever have to do progressive muscular relaxation, make sure it's under supervision, at least for the first few occasions. Once you learn it on your own, then you can practice it after that. Okay. So what we have learned is that stress emerges from some body reaction. The brain and mind connection is there, and we are trying to undo this primitive way of dealing with stress. We want the body to relax so that cognitively we can deal with the stress rather than having to physically deal with stress. Okay, so we have looked at one part which says that stress is a biological reaction. Now, in terms of what exactly happens in the phases of stress, there's a theorist called Hans Selye, and who has done a lot of research in terms of how animals get stressed, how humans get stressed, and biologically what's happening to the immune system. So throughout the pandemic, you must have seen that some hospitals had dance movement therapy, some hospitals had just Antakshari, some of them had yoga sessions that were done for the COVID patients while they were in the quarantine. Why did we focus so much on all of these things to make the person positive? Is because when you are unwell, when you're as it is stressed, your immunity goes down, and there is a biological reason for this. There is a scientific reason for why your immunity goes down, and that's exactly what this GAS this theory talks about. The general adaptive syndrome says that whenever there's a stressful situation, our body is going in that fight or flight response that we just spoke about in the earlier slide. So it means that your body is preparing itself for a war that's coming up. And obviously, in the initial phases, this is important, this is healthy, because it's going to suddenly boost your immune system, and you're willing to then fight any ailment that is there, any infection that is there, any virus that's there, any bacterial infection that's there. But what happens if your body continues to produce these chemicals, continues to produce these steroids? It's like driving the car on turbo mode for the entire duration, right? When is it that you need the turbo in a car, or when is it that you need to press the accelerator? Only when you're overtaking, or if it's a slope. That's the only time that we need the vehicle to put in some extra energy. But imagine that it's a plain road, imagine that there's traffic and you're still pressing the accelerator. What is going to happen to the car? It's going to get spoiled. The engine is going to get spoiled. You'll have to change the engine oil. The carburetor is going to get spoiled, right? So in short, that's the same thing that's happening to your body. You're putting your body into a war mode even when it's not needed, or it is a stressful situation that is not stopping at this point. It's a chronic stress. You're trying to fight that, but that chronic stress is continuing. What is going to happen is your body is going to get tired after a point. Physically, it's going to get fatigued, and it's going to go in the exhaustion stage. Right? So homeostasis is the balance stage when we are not stressed at all, things are going fine in our life. Then there is an alarm state when something happens and we try to react to that in an alarm state. The moment there is this alarm, our brain tries to get our body to be ready, and we go in the resistance stage. We are ready to fight that. But if this continues for a long duration, if we are in that kind of fight and flight response constantly, that's only going to lead to exhaustion, and for us be fatigued, and that's going to lead to burnout. Okay, and that's something that we don't want to happen. We don't want our work to lead to burnout. We don't want our day-to-day activities, our stress to reach that level wherein it physically makes us unwell. It reduces our immune system. It leads to common cold and cough suddenly becoming very wide, body pain suddenly becoming very common, sleep getting disturbed, food getting altered. People might put on a lot of weight or lose a lot of weight. So all of these changes that are taking place are actually warning signs that your body is going into that exhaustion stage, and it's a warning sign that you now need to do something about it. Okay, what is that something? That could be meditation, that could be yoga, it could be just a walk, it could be listening to music. I am nobody here to tell you what is the best way. You as an individual know that you love music, you love cooking, you like watching a film with family, you like just going for a walk, probably you like going for a trek. For you, you have to identify what is your own distressing activity. For some people, it can come from religion. For some people, it can come from spirituality. For some, it could be just reading a good book. But once you have identified what is your strategy, take that break and make sure that your body is not going in that exhaustion mode. Stop that stress before it goes into that exhaustion, because then reversing things are going to be much difficult. It will start affecting our health in a negative manner. Okay. Moving on to the next perspective, I hope people are not tired already. I hope that we are following the activities, so we feel that we are gaining something from this session as well. Okay. So moving on to the next way. Now, both these theories looked at a very biological component, a very inherent, innate tendency of us to deal with stress. Right. So the person was playing a very passive role, that there's a stressful situation, There's a job situation, possibly somebody's lost their job during the pandemic, somebody's lost their loved one during the pandemic. And these are all external things that are there and our body is biologically reacting to it. But does it always have to be biological? Do we always biologically react to that? There's a lot of emotions also involved, right? The pandemic was not just physically a problem for us. Emotionally, it has had a huge impact on us. I'm, just asking each one of you, how many of you have changed your social habits in this process? When you see somebody without wearing a mask, we have, suddenly that feeling that, okay, uh, we should be wearing a mask if that person is not. Or if you're getting into a lift, you try thinking twice whether that's a wise decision. If you're inviting somebody for a birthday party, you again have the thought, is this wise? Right? So though the restrictions are being removed, though most of us are vaccinated with double doses, that anxiety, that emotion is still there associated with the pandemic. Okay, to some extent, yes, it is beneficial because it's helping us, be in a good state of mind. It's helping us take precautions, but at the same point of time, it's having a lot of emotional impact on us as well. Right? So Holmes and Rahe, they thought that instead of focusing on the biological aspect of it, why not focus on the life events of people? So they came up with this theory that spoke about different life events that make us stressed. It need not be negative events, it could be positive events as well, right? And you'll be amused to see the list that's there of these 100 top stressful situations. It includes marriage as well as divorce, right? It includes a new job as well as losing a job. So it's not about positive or negative events, it's about how stressful that event could be. So marriage can be a positive, happy moment for everyone, but it can still have its own amount of stress that's there. Right? Getting a new job can be a happy moment, but it can still have the amount of adjustment that's needed, and therefore it could be stressful for some people. Right? So the idea here that Holmes and Rahe came up with is that why not have a list of events that most people feel stressful and then rate them at a certain level. So from 0 to 100, if you rate different things in life, and what they found out is that death of a loved one usually is the most stressful thing for most individuals globally. So that can be rated as 100, the most stressful event. Then slowly you're moving on to separation, then you're slowly moving on to other things in life, financial losses. And then you can see how different things like physical illness would also be a stressor. All of these things are then impacting us at different degree. The problem with this theory, however, was that it's limited in a sense that every individual values different things. Right? For somebody, losing a pet might be a very serious effect. For somebody, losing a pet might not be as much as a stressful event. For somebody, a new job may be really stressful. For somebody, because they have been moving from cities, they've done different jobs. For them, a new job is not as stressful. So the idea here is to identify what is my own pattern. For me, what is the most stressful thing? And then if I know that this is the list of stressful things, I can then avoid stress even before it takes place. I can focus on those areas so that there is no issue of stress that comes up. If I wait for stress to take place, then it's already too late. We call it proactive coping. You're coping proactively. You're preparing your resources. You're getting ready for the war before the war starts. Right? That's the kind of metaphor you can use for this. Okay. So I hope everybody has taken a sheet of paper and you have something to write on. So pen, a pencil and a sheet of paper. Now what we are going to do is, instead of this Holmes and Rahe list, we are going to create our own list. So individually, you have to do it. You don't have to read it out. It's your personal activity. But you have to create a list of 10 to 20 things which you think are the most stressful or have been the most stressful for you in this past month. Okay, so first, just make a list of 10 to 20 things, a minimum 10 things and a maximum of 20 things, which you think have been very stressful. It could be a different degree of stress. Some things could be really small, some things could be really intense, but try listing those things that have been stressful in the past month for you, personally for you. Okay, it's not about what other people think. It's not about what other people will judge you to be writing that thing, but for you, this has been a stressful thing. Okay, so step one of this activity is that we just list down 10 to 20 things. Why are we doing this? I know it might be a little painful for some people to think of those things again, but research has shown that whenever we try to avoid stress by just trying to forget it, that actually is not solved. If we put it down on paper, if we describe it in words, if we vocalize it, if we verbalize that, that's when you are able to better face the challenge. Okay, so rather than just pushing it under the carpet, rather than just trying to suppress stress, if you can write it in your words, express it in your own words. Not everybody is a poet, not everybody is a good writer, but in your own words, if you just have at least this list in front of you, you will know that, okay, this is what was stressful for me. Could be a publication, could be a paper that's pending, it could be a conference, it could be the child's admission at school, it could be some form of illness that's there in the family, anything that could be there, a small event or a big event. It could be, as I said, even a positive event. So if somebody has to arrange a birthday party, if somebody has to prepare for the Diwali vacation, if somebody has to prepare Farar for Diwali, that also could be stressful if you're doing it in large quantities, right? So anything that could be either positive or negative, but is going to lead to some amount of energy, it's going to need some form of resources and time. Just make a list of 10 to 20 things. Okay, we'll just take around 5 minutes to come up with this list. As I said, it's your own personal list. You're not supposed to read it to anyone. You're not needed to read it out to us. So it will be your own personal activity for your benefit. Okay, so in the chat, some people have mentioned about colleagues and the workplace, how stress can come into the picture. So that could be the event that you're looking at. Okay, so in part one, we're just writing down these words. We're not doing anything beyond that. We're just trying to come up with a list. We're not thinking about the intensity at this point of time. It could be a positive event, it could be a negative event, it could be less intense, it could be very intense. But for us in the past 1 month, what are the different events that have taken place? Okay, you don't need to describe the event. You can just make a list of it right now. And later on, as a personal homework activity, we can build upon that. Okay, I hope everybody has at least 10 things written down in the list for themselves. Okay, once you have these 10 to 20 things that are there in your list, the second part of the activity begins, right? So first, just get this list of 10 things, at least 10 things that are there in the past month that were significant things. Could be positive, could be negative, could be at the workplace, could be in your professional life, in your career, could be in your personal life, could be a global event that took place, could be some form of a natural disaster or news that you read about. It could be a promotion that somebody got, new responsibilities, new department, new job. It could be a new family role. Somebody became a grandparent, somebody became a parent. Okay, so if everybody is done with part one of the task, I'm assuming that everybody is at least has 10 things on the sheet right now, 10 things that have been crucial for them. Now moving on to the second part. So from 0 to 100 for each of these 10 to 20 things, from 0 to 100, we are now going to rate them, 100 being the most stressful. As an example, I've told you that loss of a loved one, loss of a family member is usually considered as 100, most stressful. To no stress at all will be 0. So between 0 to 100, for your own list of 10 to 20 things that you've come up with, for that list, now you're giving a number. So let's say it's a new job that I've joined, possibly that I put it on 30. It could be a birthday party that I have to arrange, I put it on 10. So that way, for you, your personal rating for those 10 to 20 things that you've come up with, what is it that you feel? How does it make you feel in terms of stress? How intense is that stress? This is your rating. It does not have to be the same for other people. For these 10 things, you're coming up with a number in between 0 to 100. There could be 2 things on the same intensity level. That's also fine. But that's your list and your intensity of these stress factors. Okay. So slowly you can start giving the ratings now to the list that you have. 0 being no stress at all, 100 being maximum stress, very painful event. And in between 0 to 100, you can decide what gradation you want to have. And then give these 10 to 20 things that you have listed. Each one of them, give them a rating of how stressful that event was for you in the last month. Okay. The benefit of this activity is, one, you are able to identify what is it that was bothering you all this time, right? There are many things that sometimes we don't recognize. They are there at the back of our mind. They could either reflect in terms of dreams that we're having. It could either reflect in terms of how we are reacting with people. But we sometimes forget what is it that is actually causing us stress. Yes, so somebody has mentioned about how do you rate certain things in terms of if it is a new thing they want to learn, maybe a new software and platform that you're learning for online learning and teaching, but you don't have time for that. So whether it's a positive event or negative event, that's not what we're concerned about. How much stress does it give us? Right. So to what extent is it? Does it physically start making you feel ill? Then it is going to be in the 80+ region. If it's just a thought that bothers you, then it will be somewhere below 30. So that's the approximate kind of range that we're looking at. So if it's something that you need to learn, you want to learn, there's a Coursera course, there's a Udemy course, edX course that you want to do, you have signed up for it, but there's no time. My example, I've signed up for 2 courses, but I still haven't found time to do them. So that's there at the back of my mind, that I have to send a research proposal, I have to do this. But how much stress is it causing? So for me, it could be 20. For somebody else, it could be 30. So that's up to you. Yes, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. There could be many things that are there in the unconscious, in the subconscious, and we don't realize how they're impacting us. Sometimes you behave rudely with family members or with your colleagues, and then you later realize I shouldn't have done this. Right? It means that there is something happening at the subconscious level which you forgot to mention, which you forgot to address at that point of time. So slowly it has come out in its way through the rude behavior that you have shown. Right? But that's a warning sign again that you're possibly not paying attention to what is happening. So now that you have this list in front of you, suddenly it will become clear that, okay, this is what was causing all that stress. This is why I couldn't sleep well. This is why my food was affected. This is why, this whole feeling of being claustrophobic was there. Okay, so once you have this list now, you have the ratings for it now. Now try and understand and think what is it that you can do about it. As I said, each person will have their own way of dealing with it. Can you first prioritize these? Can some of these be dealt with? Are some of these impossible to deal with, right? So let's say it's a permanent health condition. We can't change that. If it's a hereditary condition, we can't change that. If there is some issue in the family that cannot be changed by you individually, again, those are things that cannot be changed. But then how can you try and deal with those things, right? So with this list that you have a list and you have the intensity rating for it. Now you will understand what is it that impacts you most, how is it impacting you, and then how you can deal with it. So you can first categorize it into whether it's eustress or distress. If it's eustress, it's good in a way. If it's an acute stress, it was a temporary event, it will go away, this will pass. If it's a chronic stress, then that's something that you need to focus your attention with priority. So we'll have to prioritize because we won't be able to deal with all of these ratings at one go. We'll have to solve them one by one. So something that has a very high rating, something that is chronic stress, something that is within our control, we can do something about it. That is what we need to first start focusing on. Okay, so just keep this list for your reference. Just keep it there at the back of your mind. And we'll come back to it in a while with another activity to see how we can then tackle it in a proper manner. Okay, but this is one activity. For some people, actually writing it down in words has been found to be really therapeutic. So when you put it down in words, it could be in a poetry format, it could be in a story format, it could be in a narration. We call it journaling, where in your day-to-day, you're writing down your experiences, how you felt, what could have been the reasons for it. So you're writing that down. Some people have the habit of writing down a diary, right? So it's up to you, whatever works best for you, that is something that you need to follow. Again, this is one principle that I want you all to remember. There are no permanent solutions. What works best for us is what we need to first identify and then start implementing that. So for some, it's just music that will work. You just listen to some nice instrumental music, you'll feel nice. That's something that works for you. Just because somebody says go for a walk early in the morning, have a 5-kilometer marathon done, that is what makes me feel healthy. You might get more stressed preparing for that marathon, buying those shoes, then getting ready, waking up early, making sure children are ready, they're going to school, and then that marathon, rather than making you healthy, makes you feel more unhealthy. So you don't have to follow what other people are doing. Try and identify what works best for you. For somebody, running is going to work. For somebody, just a walk will work. For somebody, music is going to work. For somebody, watching a OTT platform is going to work. So identify what works best for you and then try to deal with that. Okay. So now we have looked at the third theory, which was not biological, but which looked at what is happening in our environment. What are the events that are causing us stress? Right? So we have kind of looked at two extremes, something that is completely internal, biological in the brain and in the body. And we've seen something that is completely external, events that are taking place, most of which are not in our control. But what about the interaction between this? That's exactly what the transactional model given by Lazarus looks at. So we are going to look at this model a little more in detail because this is thought to be one of the most comprehensive models, which borrows from both the biological components, psychological components, and also from what's happening in the environment. It's more of a give and take, right? In the environment, we are not passive. Whatever happens in our lives, we are not passive players for that. We are actively also influencing that. Whatever choices you make in life are going to again impact you. Whatever decisions you don't take in life are again going to impact you. So either ways, whether you are being a passive or an active player, things are going to be interacting with you. So the environment and your interaction is what we are looking in the transactional model of stress. So what this theory assumes and what it has found out is that when we are interacting with the environment, there are two things that happen at a cognitive level. So human beings especially, We are blessed with that capacity to think about what is happening. Right? Animals, unfortunately, deal with it the way their instincts drive them. So if a dog is injured, if it starts limping, it will limp for a while. When it gets fine, it will start walking again. Right? Humans will try to think about this event. We will try to go more into the details of why did I get hurt? What should I have done? Can I go to the doctor? What should be the physiotherapy after that? How will this impact me? Will I be permanently disabled? The dog on the street is not going to think of all of these things. Possibly that's the reason why they're happier than us, because they think less. Right? So for us, there is a lot of thinking that's happening, which possibly sometimes gives us stress. How can we use this capacity of thinking to in fact reduce that stress? That's what we're going to look at in this transactional model. Okay. So there were two of these things in the image. Let's say that we are color coding it. The red apple is the one that talks about the dangers that are there or the stressful things that are there. And on the right, you have you yourself, your skills, your strength, right? That's the orange or the yellow apple that you have with you. And this balance is what is going to determine whether you're stressed or you're dealing with life successfully. Now, if you see the tilt is more towards the red apple, that the stone seems to be tilted more there, which means that there is some amount of stress. Okay, now let's see what this red apple is about. So in this part, we are going to have what is called as the primary appraisal. The way we have a job appraisal, the way we have a different appraisals for research and so on. You are trying to appraise the event that's taking place. So the 10 things, the 15 things that you wrote on that list, for each of those, we are going to think whether this was an irrelevant event and I simply was stressing about it. Was this a positive event and yet it was stressful? Was this something that was harmful but challenging? So when somebody mentioned that they want to learn something new, maybe a new software, maybe they want to learn new platforms of online teaching or how to record lecture videos. That's a harmful thing because it's stressful in that sense, but it's challenging. It's also energetic in that sense. But let's say that somebody is developing symptoms of fever, then that is harmful and a threat as well. So it's negative in both ways, right? So whatever is happening in our lives, we think about it and we then start labeling those things, or we should start labeling them as whether this is irrelevant, whether this is relevant for me. Okay, so let's say that it is, probably something happening in the family, which other people will deal with properly, and you don't need to interfere in. Then you're looking into irrelevant things that are stressful. Can you stop paying your attention there because they are irrelevant? Then you've already dealt with stress in that, right? If there is something that is positive, that's going to cause you stress and not distress. So that's anyway dealt with in a positive way. Something that's harmful but a challenge, if you put your energy that your brain is producing in your body to make that harmful thing, but to use it to energize you, then that becomes a challenge and you benefit from that challenge, right? Going back to that example, if there's a Coursera course that I want to do, it is causing me stress because I'll have to spend more time doing that course besides my daily routine. But is that going to be professionally helpful for me? Is that going to boost my career, or is it going to be something that I'll be satisfied about? Then even if it's harmful, it's challenging, and I'll devote extra time for that and I'll feel happy about it. So I've dealt with it, right? And then finally, things that are harmful and are a threat. So if I have symptoms of fever, rather than just being stressed about it, can I ask my family doctor that these are the signs and symptoms? Should I get a test done? Should I get an RT-PCR test done? Should I do my lung functional test done and see if it's COVID or something else? You will get that stress out of the way only if you deal with it. So that's what we call as problem focused coping. If you just try to avoid that stress and use avoidance coping, that's not going to be beneficial. If you just say that, okay, I'm having fever, I'll do one thing, I'll go and watch Netflix, I'll feel better. That's only going to give you temporary relief. That's what it's called as emotion focused coping, or just focusing on the emotions. You feel nice about it, you go, you have ice cream, you have cake, you feel nice about it, but that's not going to remove the fever. The fever is there because of some infection. it's only medicines that will take care of it, or it's only rest that will take care of it, right? So if something is harmful and a threat, it needs to be dealt with both emotion and problem focused coping, because that's what in the long run is going to be useful. Okay, so this is the primary appraisal part. We are looking at the stressful event and we are deciding what is the intensity, how relevant it is, how should I be dealing with it. Okay, that's the external stimulus that you are looking at. Now moving to the next, the yellow apple that was there in the picture. This is your own appraisal. There is a new job, there is a new task, there's a new meeting that I have to attend. Am I prepared for it? Is it my strength? If I'm good at making PPTs, if I'm good at statistics, if I'm good at research, is that my strength? Is it going to help me in this meeting? Is it going to help me in this research? Then I consider it as my strength. I'm going to appraise how I am prepared for this war. Okay, whatever stressful situation is there, how well am I prepared for it? What are my weaknesses? Can I build on those weaknesses? And then finally, how I will cope with it. Right? So going back to the image, you're looking at on one side, how is the stressor? You are trying to analyze it yourself. Nobody else is going to do that for you, because everybody will have a different perspective of stress. For some people, attending this entire day long lecture could be stressful. For some people, that could be in fact a good break from their daily work, right? So you are appraising this situation. That's the first part. And then you're appraising your own strengths and weaknesses. And that's the next part of it, wherein you're trying to deal with it. So when both of these things come together, you will be able to identify that, yes, I thought this was dangerous, but I already have the skills for it. So I don't need to worry about it. There is a difficult presentation coming up. There is a job appraisal that's coming up. But when I see I already have done a good work throughout the year, so I don't need to be stressed about it. Right? So that way, when you're comparing your own strengths and weaknesses with what is there in the environment, you have answers to most of the questions that you were stressed about unnecessarily. Okay, and that's how we are dealing with it, by answering our own questions. Okay, so this perspective, now again, as I said, we'll take up some questions. There are other activities that we can do if there is still time. But if there are any questions that we have at this point of time, if somebody needs time to go back to the initial activity, you could do that. Or if there are any questions we could take up, I would be happy to answer them. It's 6:20, it's 4:25 at this point. So we could take up questions. Or if it's too early, then I have another activity for you all. So what we spoke about right now, your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, and what is it there, the environment. So again, let's have a sheet of paper, a fresh sheet of paper. And with pencil, with pen, you can just have 4 columns drawn onto it. We want 4 columns in which we are going to write a list of things. This activity is what is called as an anxiety balance sheet. So you have debits and credits. Anything that gives you anxiety is a debit. Anything that makes you happy, anything that you're confident about is a credit in account. Yeah. So every time there is an imbalance in this account of ours, we feel anxious, we feel stressed about it. Whenever the debits are beyond the credits, whenever we are higher on credits, it makes us happy. That's the metaphor we're taking in. Okay, so on a sheet of paper, can we quickly have 4 columns drawn? If you can see it on the screen, in the first column, we are writing what we know. So these are things that we know about. In the second column, we are writing about things that we don't know. We don't have control over it. We don't know these things. Okay. In the third column, you have things that you can control. You have influence over those things. You can change certain things about it. And the last column, you have things that you can't change. Okay. So things that I know, things that I don't know, things that I can change, things that I cannot change. Those are the 4 columns that we're looking at. Okay, just have the sheet ready first, and then we'll discuss how we are using this sheet. Okay, so on a fresh sheet of paper, we now have 4 columns. Something that we know, something that we don't know is the second column. Something that we can influence or can change is the third column. Something that we can't change, can't influence is the fourth column. Okay, if everybody has this ready, now think about the upcoming week, the week after this session, once this session is done. What are the things that are causing you anxiety? By anxiety, if you have to define that, that's future-oriented worry. What if, whenever you ask this question to yourself, what if? What if I'm not able to finish? What if I'm not able to complete things in the deadline? What if I don't publish a paper this year? What if this happens? What if that happens? Right? So all future-oriented worry, things that have not yet happened, can happen, may not happen, but you're worried about them. That is future-oriented worry. That's called anxiety. Right? So in the next week or in the next month, what are the things that are bothering you? What is it that you're anxious about? What is it that you're worried about? Will colleges open? Will students come to college? Will it be hybrid? Will it be offline completely? Will the cases increase? Will we go back to a lockdown? There could be numerous questions that could be bothering us. Okay, so to help you out, I'll take the example that I've just mentioned, that the colleges are starting, campuses are starting, especially Maharashtra now, the regulations are being relaxed a bit. Those who are vaccinated can come back to campus. But again, if there's an option that some people can do it from home, those who are not sure, those who are not vaccinated, do it from home. So what we know is that the restrictions are being lifted. We know that offline classes are going to start. We know that students are going to come to college. What is it that I don't know? How many students will come to class? I don't know whether they will enjoy classes again. I don't know whether I'll be teaching hybrid or I'll be teaching offline or I'll be teaching online. Okay. So what is it that I don't know? These are certain things that I don't know. What is it that I can influence? Now I know that it can be hybrid. I know that it can be offline entirely. I know it can be online entirely. I know that there is a possibility of a lockdown again, the worst case scenario, right? What is it that I can do? What is it that I can control? I can possibly have PPTs ready. I can have recorded lectures ready. I can have my material ready. I can think of assignments that can be done offline as well as online. I can think of ways in which a field visit can be converted into an online event. So what is it that I can control and be ready for the worst case scenario is what I'm writing in the third column. And what is it that I can't control? Obviously, the number of COVID cases is something you can't directly control. You can't control how the vaccination drive is progressing. You can't control the decisions of the government in terms of lockdown, right? So this is something we can't control. We can't change those things. Okay, so we have a column that will be created. Right now, you might have very few things, but do this activity as a homework today if possible, or this week if possible. Anything that is bothering you about the upcoming week, about the upcoming month, write down those things in terms of what is it that you know about that week, what is it that you don't know about those stressful events, what is it that you can influence about those stressful events, and what is it that you can't influence or you can't change about those stressful events. Okay, that is part one of the activity. You will have a list in front of you. Now, if that list has many things in the second and the fourth column, that's your debits column, right? What you don't know and what you can't control. If there's a huge list and I don't know this, I don't know this, I don't know this, I can't control this, I don't know how many cases would increase. There are many things that are there in this. that means that your debits are more than your credits. Your first and third column is less compared to your second and fourth. It means you have more debits as compared to credits by default, which means that you're going to be stressed about it. Okay. So the activity now in the second part is to see if we can shift certain things from column 2 and 4 to column 1 and 3. Okay. Seems impossible right now, but let's try how this can happen. So I don't know how many students are going to come back to campus. Can I change that? Can I send out on our WhatsApp group for the class? Can I ask students how many people are coming, how many people are not coming? If they respond and I have a number, something that I didn't know suddenly now goes into what I know. So it's removed from the debits column and now it's going into the credit column. Okay, now I couldn't influence whether it will be hybrid mode, it will be online mode, it will be offline mode. Okay, but now I know that 40 students are going to come to class, 10 of them are going to attend it online from their home. Now this proportion of 40-10 is what I know. So I can develop my teaching strategy in such a way. I can influence that strategy in such a way that even if it's hybrid, my focus will be more for the offline and little for the online because the ratio is 40 to 10 students. If only 4 students were coming to campus and let's say 50 students were doing it from home, my focus would have been more on the online teaching part, right? So with the same resources, with the same time I have, now because I've shifted something from what I don't know to what I know, things that I could not influence is now things that I can influence. So you're moving things now from the debits to the credits column. And soon you will see that you are reducing your stress that was there because we are stressed about things that are uncertain. We don't know what is going to happen. We are anxious about it. That's why that stress is happening. Okay, so if we can be certain about it, if we can be proactively prepared for it, we can then be in a position to then influence it. Okay, so try out this activity, see how many things you can shift from what you don't know. Can you ask, can you spread information, can you find out information and then shift it to what you know? Is there something that you can't control? Can some of those things, at least, there will obviously be things we cannot control at all, but there'll be some things that we can be prepared for if we can't control. Then can that be shifted into what I can influence? Okay, so that way you'll see that your credits go on increasing, your debits go on decreasing. In short, your stress is going to reduce for those things that you were uncertain about. Okay, so do this activity and let us know how did you all find it. Was it useful for the next week? If it's a stressful week that you're looking forward to, see how that activity is going to help. And in the meanwhile, we could take up any questions that are there. You all can type your questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice session. Now the session is open for discussion. Participants are requested if they have any question, they can ask. I guess there is one question from Dr. Neeraj Sharma. How to settle ourselves and control stress when sometimes some discussion start to trigger anxiety and preoccupied fear in mind, despite of matter is really concern and lead to stress or not, especially in workplace.
Okay, so we have two things happening here. One is that there is some past experience, there is some emotional baggage that already exists because maybe the relationship with the colleague or some event that has taken place in the past. We already have a judgment, we already have a preconceived notion, we already have some emotional baggage associated that in the past things did not go well or this is what happened in the past, right? So the brain by default tries to use that information to predict. That's the easiest way we deal with our environment. So we assume that in the future also this is what is going to happen, which one, it can lead to stress, but secondly, it can also prepare us to deal with that event in case it goes in the wrong direction. right? So first of all, you have thought about some event that's there, which has had this emotional package. Secondly, you're saying that if there is a discussion that triggers that anxiety, so we are already aware that this discussion is moving towards that problematic direction, and we are aware that it is moving towards that problematic direction. So it's good in a way that there is that awareness that you already know that this is leading to that anxiety, which can possibly become much more intense. If that awareness is there, if you remember, we spoke about that entire stress cycle, which starts off from the brain and then goes to the body, right? There's that small window period that we have of changing that cycle, because once it starts, then it will become a physiological reaction and we won't be able to stop it immediately. It will take time on its own, right? So when you are alert, when you are aware that, okay, something is happening and I think this is going to go, that topic is going to start, and we probably are going to have an argument with this colleague, or I'm probably going to have some form of miscommunication or some form of issues with this colleague, can there be some break that can be included here? So either you change the topic or you try to move away from the discussion if you cannot face the person and have this thing done. So in any way, if you try to mitigate it at that point itself, rather than waiting for it to escalate, that's where your golden period, that small window period is that you have. Yeah, but it's good that that awareness is there. So first of all, that awareness has to be there, and then you can pinpoint and be sure and be ready for what is going to come next, because you know that in the past this has happened. But on the same point, in the long run, also try to work on having this openness that, okay, in the past this person has behaved in this way. There is a possibility, it may be a very small possibility, but there's a possibility that they may not always do the same thing. So we can still have the possibility open of a good conversation with this person.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I have received some question from delegates. May I ask, sir?
Sure. Please go ahead. I'm also
Yeah.
seeing the chat for the question.
Yeah, sir. So first question is, which activity should I avoid during stress condition?
So when you look at the biological aspect of what's happening during stress, your body is aroused, right? There's a lot of activity going on in the body. So if you engage in something that is further going to increase that, then that is something that we need to avoid, because we want to relax the body. So the reason why we talk about yoga, the reason why we talk about meditation, the reason why we talk about relaxation is because physiologically you're trying to calm down the body. So if you have caffeine, if you have any kind of substances, either smoking or alcohol, if you're indulging in any form of exercising which is excessive, all of these activities are again going to increase the arousal level. So as it is, stress has increased it, and you're further increasing it by these physical activities. So you're focusing on everything that is going to calm down the body. So all those activities should be avoided, which are going to increase the activity level. And you're focusing on things that are going to calm down the body physically.
Okay, sir. Thank you. One more question is there from student side. How to handle exam related stress?
Okay, so again, we spoke about emotional focus coping. We spoke about avoidance and approach coping, and we spoke about problem focus coping, right? In tomorrow, day after session with Dr. Shraddha, you'll have more details about coping in general. But what we saw is that why is it that we are stressed about exams, or why is it that we're stressed about a job or an interview or anything of that sort? The main reason is uncertainty. We are not sure what questions will be asked. Will I go blank in the exam? Will I forget whatever I've studied in the exam? This is obviously for those who have studied. If somebody is not studied, then by default, you're going to be stressed, because anyway, you won't know how the answers are going to be, right? So first thing is to be prepared for it. So you have to have studied for the exam. What you don't know about the situation is the questions. You obviously don't know what questions will be asked. You don't know which examiner will be there. You don't know how they'll create it. But what you know is the expectations from students. You possibly have last year's question papers. You possibly have your professors who will tell you what is expected from this assignment, right? So again, that whole anxiety balance sheet, we're trying to shift what I don't know from what I know. If I keep many topics for option in the exam, obviously I'll be uncertain about it, and that will lead to stress. If I don't know what is the pattern of the assignment, if I haven't attended classes, if I haven't spoken to my professors, I'll again be more anxious about it. So first of all, being prepared for it, and then trying to see what I can shift from not knowing to know. That is what will help you deal with it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir has briefly focused on the stress types, its level, and the performance. Biopsychosocial phenomena he has explained, how it affects on the health, some theoretical perspectives, and also he nicely explained the difference between the acute and the chronic stress and how to overcome it. Also conducted a very nice activity for stress relief. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable insights on understanding and tackling tricks for the stress. I hope your address will help us for managing the stress, and definitely it will improve the quality of life with lots of happiness. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sir, please kindly accept this virtual bouquet on behalf of convener Dr. P.D. Chaudhary, Principal, Progressive Education Society, Modern College of Pharmacy, Nigdi, Pune, and Coordinator of Faculty Development Program, Dr. Bhushan Pimpre, Head of Pharmacognosy Department, Progressive Education Society, Modern College of Pharmacy, as a token of appreciation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please kindly accept the certificate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.